All right, everybody, we're back. Welcome to the Wildcast podcast. This is your host, Michael Lev, a senior writer and columnist for the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com. And I am here today with our intrepid Arizona men's basketball reporter, Bruce Pascoe, who's been on the road forever, battling the elements, battling illness, doing the job better than anybody out there in the country covering a men's basketball beat. Bruce, before we get to you, I got to read a message from our sponsor. Did you know we have a presenting sponsor for this podcast at long last? Isn't that great news?
Yeah, I think Justin did.
He
once.
did.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
He
it
did.
Is. Yeah.
Here we go. This episode is brought to you by Pima Federal. Whether you're saving for your first car, buying a home, or growing your business, Pima Federal puts your goals first. They offer personalized solutions, competitive rates, and expert guidance every step of the way. Because at Pima Federal, banking isn't just about money, it's about you. Learn more at pimafederal.org. Thank you to Pima Federal for sponsoring the Wildcast. Thank you to Bruce Pascoe for joining us. Bruce, welcome back to Tucson. How are you feeling today?
Hanging in there. It's been a wild ride, man, and just a lot of good times and a lot of work. So what can I say? It's kind of a combination of fatigue and adrenaline kind of gets you through it.
So I was not able to make it to Indianapolis. I had some stuff come up with my family. Everything's okay now. And I was able to watch everything from afar, and I did talk to some people who were, boots on the ground in Indianapolis. And I would say the general sentiment was that everyone had a great time at the Final Four until the game started. And then it was kind of a letdown, honestly. We'll review the game a little bit here, kind of put that to bed. We'll talk about the season as a whole, and then we'll get into the portal and what next year's team might look like, which is a very difficult exercise at this time with so much being fluid. But I thought, Bruce, that it was kind of a combination of Arizona playing maybe its worst game of the year and also maybe playing the best opponent that it played all season. Those two things together basically made it impossible for them to compete in that ball game.
Yeah. I mean, they matched up. We knew they matched up really well with them. I mean, Michigan had the size. We've talked all year about how Arizona can pound it in and how successful they've been. And then they, getting the line and this and that. But Michigan does all those things well. And, they just, it is a case of they literally played a great game, and Arizona it's kind of amazing, really, because they didn't play anything close to that all year, struggling. And they had gotten down a lot, but this was something different. And it's, you wonder if maybe part of it is, subconsciously they're just happy to be there. They made the Final Four for the first time in 25 years. There was so much made about it last week. It's just tough to keep maybe an edge up a little bit. I mean, you don't know, but it just looked to me like Michigan was out. They had fire in their eyes, or whatever you want to call it. Like they were coming out, and they got up whatever it was, 10-1 or whatever, and that was pretty much it. I mean, Arizona made a little run there in the first half, but nothing serious.
Yeah, the closest they got was 5 points. That happened a couple of times, and then as soon as they did that, Michigan went on another run again. Tommy and the other coaches, they do these like really quick interviews during the first half on TV. You obviously can't see those when you're at the arena, but it's amazing to me, and this sort of speaks to how Tommy's mind works, that the things that he mentions during that like 15-second interview are usually really poignant. There was a couple games ago where he talked about like loose balls and rebounds were going to be the key to the game. And it was like, that was the key to the game. So what he said during the first half against Michigan was, we need the right people making the right plays. Like, why would he say that? And then I am watching it all play out, and there's Dwayne Aristode like trying to create off the dribble, turning the ball over. Like that is definitely not his strength, right? There's Toby Awaka jacking up a 3-pointer like early in the shot clock, which is something that he never does and they never do. All of which just spoke to the degree to which they were just out of sorts.
Yeah.
In that game, they just did not look like themselves, and they could never really get the train back on the tracks.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, no, I remember those two instances and thinking that myself. That's not characteristic of this team. And you wonder if it's, again, if they started to panic in any way, or or maybe they just, because they were left open purposely by Michigan because they weren't supposed to do those things. They just figured, okay, I'll try it, and it didn't work out. It was very, very different. I mean, it was very different than any other game we've seen this year.
Yeah, they sort of seemed like a team that was bulletproof in a way, because there were so many different options, right? Like if so-and-so's having an off game, someone else is going to step up. And that happened over and over and over again. Then you get into this particular situation, and your three freshman starters, Koa Pete, Braden Burries, and Ivan Karchenkov, they all had off games. They combined to go 12 for 42 from the floor, those three. So that's like three of your really like kind of 6.5 player rotation. Aristote is, he sort of receded a little bit and not had a huge role. And, there's 6 guys that they play the most out of anybody. And then another of those 6 was Jaden Bradley, who had all sorts of foul trouble. He's always had this little bad habit of kind of extending his off arm sometimes when he dribbles and drives, and that got him into trouble, got him into foul trouble. So you had the combination, again, bad combination of the freshmen were struggling, and you didn't have the steadying hand of your senior point guard, Jaden Bradley, to kind of settle things down because he was in foul trouble.
That's absolutely right. I mean, in most of their close, tough games, Bradley played 34, 35, 36 minutes, and he was always out there, steadying influence on the team. There's no question about that. And we all know the history of, it's really hard to win in the Final Four a lot if you have to rely on freshmen. It just is. And these are outstanding, experienced freshmen, but they're still the first time at this level, and it's hard. I mean, we saw what happened to Duke. They melted down, and I remember thinking at the beginning of the year, this is why I picked Arizona to finish. I think I ranked them 14th to start, and I just thought they have too many freshmen they're going to be relying on. They can't, and then they well outpaced what I thought, but still at the end of the day, it's hard if you don't have that experience, I think, and so without Bradley, that was huge. I looking back on that, I don't think we made enough of that. That really was a big deal.
So the Fab Five of Michigan, where they were in the building doing an alt broadcast,
right?
They didn't win the national championship. They got really close as freshmen, but they didn't win it. This Michigan team that did win it was an old team, right? Like Yaxel Lendeborg is what, 24, 25 years old. He started his college career, I think, in 2020, right? Sixth year guy.
Yeah, he started in 20. Yeah, halfway through that year, he went to Arizona Western, right?
Yeah. So, and their entire starting lineup is made of veteran transfers. Did have some freshmen coming off the bench, but old usually wins in these scenarios. It happened in football too. Like Indiana, of course, Kurt Cignetti did an amazing job of identifying the right players, but they had a lot of older players on that team, an older skewing team. And it's just natural when players are in this sort of developmental stage of their careers that if you've got a bunch of 22 and 23-year-olds and your opponents are 19 and 20-year-olds, you're probably going to have some sort of an advantage. And I think that was something that really helped Michigan this year get over the top. Plus, Dusty May is a really good coach, and they did a good job of identifying players that would fit together well, which to me is like kind of the secret sauce of all of this stuff. I think Tommy does a good job of that too, is like, how are the pieces going to come together? But Michigan, older team, best team, I think a deserving champion.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And we're entering portal roster rebuilding season. And to me, I think this is as interesting as the season itself. Sometimes, how is it going to come together? This is the first step. Do you take this guy? Where does he fit? What's his personality like? How old is he, et cetera? What's his agenda with the agents or whatever? I mean, there's just so much there coming up, but, and then taking those pieces together in July and building them. And you're right. I think both of these coaches are really good at that.
You can't just plug all the variables into Chat GPT and and let like AI or some program tell you which guys to go after, right? Like I think there's a certain feel to it. And one of the reasons that I was advocating for Arizona to lock up Tommy Lloyd long term, do whatever they needed to do to make him happy, was I feel like he's got a good sense for how to put a team together. I asked him that question when they were back here in between these the Elite Eight and the Final Four. Like, how do you know, like when you're putting a team together, whether the pieces will fit? And he said, don't make me off to be some sort of genius or maestro. Like it's really kind of one player at a time. And, he talked a lot about like certain like tangible things that they might look for, like we have a certain personality as a team. So we're looking for, rugged players, tough players, etc. But he also talked a lot about like personalities, right? And like how they are as people. And he always, often, all the time, when you ask him about a player, the first thing he'll say is, "Oh, he's a really good guy," right? So how much does chemistry and play into the formula here when it comes to putting together a team, and why do you think Tommy has been pretty good at it?
Well, you said it. I mean, I think that's something he relies on maybe more than more coaches. I think when Sean Miller was here, he had some of that, but I think his approach is more like, I'm going to get the best guys I can get and I'm going to make them work. And they did sometimes, and sometimes, it kind of blew up, but mostly just when they had off-season issues or off-court issues. But, but he has a different personality. Whereas I think, Tommy is obviously, as we know, been kind of a guy who is easy to get along with. And I think he likes to get along with his players. He's super competitive and can get into them, but he has a knack with that. And you're right. You're seeing now that he's been here 5 years and these are all his players and ones that he's recruited for many, many years. I mean, Cole Pete, they started recruiting when he was in 8th grade or getting out of that. That's when Tommy Lloyd got hired, so this is the first year or two where you're really seeing all his own, 100% of guys that he's, developed and watched and, and come together. Even a guy like Jaden Bradley, they had recruited him out of high school, kept an eye on him, and then boom, they got him after his freshman year at Alabama. They knew all about him and they knew he would work. And obviously it's worked out really well. He's added to his game every year. So, that is it. It is a huge part of it. I always feel like sometimes I talk too much about chemistry and things like that. And maybe more so than standard X and O's. But, I go back this year, I think the biggest key to really making this work was Hawaka accepting that he was going to be off the bench, Del Orso moving off the bench and gradually accepting it seems like, and then they were able to get that rotation really workable. Whereas I think last year, to your point about, I think last year actually early on, it was more challenging. It wasn't that they had bad guys, but they'd had too many duplicative talents and they weren't really sure what to do with Carter Bryant, and they weren't really sure if Tobe Waka or Krivas should start. Krivas is coming back off that injury sort of for a while, and all these things were going on and they played really poorly, and that was 80% they were playing poorly because their chemistry and togetherness was kind of messed up. And so they got it together late last season, finished up pretty strong, and then obviously this year's been off the charts.
Yeah, you never know whether it's going to work. But, I think it's comforting as a U of A fan to have someone like Tommy Lloyd in making those decisions, because he has something of a track record when it comes to putting teams together. Yeah. So I made reference to this column that I wrote last week, basically saying Arizona needs to do whatever it takes. Give the listeners a little inside baseball here. That column was supposed to run in our print special section on Saturday. We had to pull it at the last minute because the announcement came out on Friday that Tommy had agreed to a contract extension. We actually got wind of this on Thursday night, pretty late. And, sometimes you're able to verify these things through multiple sources. Sometimes you're not. We weren't able to Thursday night, but we knew it was coming, and it did indeed happen on Friday. He himself Tommy Lloyd announced it during his standard Friday news conference, and very big deal for the program, to be sure, to have this sort of sense of security. There aren't a lot of jobs that come along that are of the caliber of North Carolina. Kansas, I might put into that bucket as another one where if that job came open, maybe Tommy Lloyd is in the mix for it. I don't think there are a lot of others. So, without getting into too many of the details of what actually the contract looks like, what does it mean for the program to have gotten this done and to, basically kind of lock up Tommy Lloyd for the foreseeable future?
Well, I think it's certainly he got a more of a raise than I thought he would have out of that. So that also keeps it pretty competitive. He's going to make $7 million, over $7 million next year. There's not too many schools that are going to pay more than that. So he's locked in. His buy-up went out slightly. I think it's up to $10 million now. So yeah, it gives him stability there. And I think, to me, the most important thing about this, and we still haven't seen the details because I don't have the actual contract. They have not released it. But are there assurances that their rev share and their NIL marketing efforts, blah, 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 this and that, basically how much money are they going to get for a roster budget? And is it going to be competitive? And that's, I think, really the crux of what him and his people were kind of fighting for, is they felt like it wasn't competitive, and they're not asking to have a $19 million payroll like whoever, BYU, Kentucky. There was a lot of talk. Those paid a ton, maybe. They're not trying to be up there, but they want to be competitive. And this is at a time, it's a tough time. Arizona's been forced to, had a financial crisis, forced to do things. They're trying to build up football because there's some potential to make more money there. And men's basketball was just like, hey, what about us? So I think that's where they're at. And maybe this protects them a little bit, but we'll see how that plays out. But it certainly seems that Tommy Lloyd wouldn't have agreed to that if he didn't feel a little more assured that he wasn't about that.
Yeah. So there were rumors, even published reports of some friction between Tommy Lloyd and Arizona's athletic director, Desiree Reed-Francois. I addressed some of that in the piece that I wrote, which everyone can still check out at Tucson.com. A lot of it still holds up, even though, they actually went through and went ahead and gave him a contract extension. But I think one of the causes of the friction was what you're talking about, right? It's revenue or resource allocation, I guess you would say, right? Like making sure that, that men's basketball was getting what Tommy Lloyd deemed to be its fair share, right? Like Desiree, and I think she's, onto something with this. She's been very football focused since she got here because she knows that football is the greatest revenue generator.
That's exactly the problem.
Right.
That's exactly the problem with men's basketball. There's they want it to be, they want their share, exactly like you said.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And she's trying to balance budgets, and
you can't blame her, right? From that aspect, you can't blame her because she's looking at this big picture, like industry wide. We all know that football is the biggest revenue generator and this and that, and Arizona's not fully tapped. Basketball is fully tapped for the most part. There's not much more you can get out of it except for, maybe people pitching in more to the revenue sharing. And then you have the situation where, one of the interesting things about this whole negotiation is it's not just rev share percentage, which apparently was a little low for the industry standards for men's basketball. That's the money that comes from the school. Also, there is, under the new house rules, the schools themselves now can market and fundraise for NIL money. So in other words, U of A could go to whoever, Jim Click or whoever, and say, give money to men's basketball. And then that entity might say, well, we're only going to give the athletic department half as much then if we're going to, because there's only so much of the pie out there. And so if it's essentially asking, you might divert some donor resources to men's basketball, and that's probably not as good for the whole athletic department, especially at a time when they need money. So there's a lot of reasons for conflict here. It's really understandable. It's, and I can't wait to see exactly how this plays out. You're also at a time where here we are, the portal just opened yesterday. If you're Tommy Lloyd, you have to know your roster budget. How much can you spend on players? do we even know? Does he know? I don't know. I mean, and if they don't know, I would think it'd be a pretty big source of frustration. But possibly because of this deal, they do know. I just don't know because they haven't released any details.
Yeah, one of the other stipulations that has been reported, and we had heard similar through various sources, was that Tommy is now going to be reporting directly to U of A President Garamella and essentially cutting Desiree Reed-Francois out of the lines of communication, which is a very unusual thing to happen. We don't know if that is written into the contract or if that is some sort of like verbal agreement at some point. Hopefully we will get the exact contract and we can take a look at it and analyze it and so forth. But it certainly speaks to a shifting power dynamic within the athletic department. And to me, it even, puts into question like her long-term future here. If you're no longer overseeing like sort of the flagship program of the department, I don't know like if she's going to be here for the long term. But that is pure speculation on my part. Everything might be hunky-dory behind the scenes, but certainly an interesting aspect of this whole soap opera was that part of it, don't you think?
Yeah. I think the report that Garamella was going to be his boss, I think that's a little exaggerated. From what I told, that's not quite the case. It's more nuanced than that. But I think he will have direct say or direct pipeline to him, especially when it comes to money issues. Like, hey, we're only getting $3 million or whatever here from rev share, and then you can go to Garamella and say, whatever. I think that's more what it is, but again, we haven't seen it. They haven't released it. It's really interesting to me because they said they would release the term letter right away on Friday. Never got it Friday. Didn't get it Monday. Didn't get it Tuesday. Haven't got it today. Here we are on Wednesday. Eventually it will become public record, and we'll see if it says anything there. But it could also be, like you said, it could be a handshake thing too. So who knows? But I in any case, I do know. I think there's definitely some truth to it that Garamella is more involved, and that's big because I don't think his background is not sports. He has all kinds of credentials, but I think that his first year or so here was, from what I understand, when basketball had an issue, and if they goaded them, it would be like go to the AD. The AD is in charge. Now maybe that's changing a little bit, especially in certain areas, and that's big. Yeah, and it is unusual. So we'll see how it works out. But it's not unusual that at several, many campuses that the basketball coach, and the president are sort of the same level. I mean, and the AD is sort of more of like a, what do you need kind of person. That's not unusual. I mean, a lot of these big programs that we were talking about, like years ago, I used to cover UNLV, and that was the exact situation they had there. It was like the coach and the president. They were that was the reporting structure. I don't know if it was formal there either, but and then I think Kansas
was Jerry Tarkanian the coach when you were there, or somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he was there. I was there towards the end of his thing. That was a really contentious thing. In fact, what happened there was a different president came in, and he thought that they went after him, and it was really ugly. But I think for years and years and years, and this is so long ago, it's not really relevant, but it was one of those dynamics where it was the president and the coach. But I think some of these other schools I don't know the details, but I'm guessing Kansas, Kentucky, North Carolina, they probably all have some kind of element like that where men's basketball has a little more say, just because they do generate so much money, not just in ticket sales or whatever, but literally people donating to the university itself because they're excited about how the basketball team does. And I think that's what's happening here. I think Garamella saw, and there was talk, maybe some donors went to him and said, you got to do it. I don't know. But if he got the impression that, hey, as a university, we want to keep people excited about it through basketball. I mean, basketball at the end of the day is a marketing tool, and so I think it sounds like maybe he's sort of getting that, as far as sort of believing that that's a thing that they need to do.
Yes, absolutely. Regardless of all of that, I think Tommy wanted to stay here.
Yeah.
He likes it here. And you did a great story about his mentor and friend and former boss, Mark Few, just sort of, like Mark Few's, was it his dad was a
Yeah.
minister who stayed at like the same church for 50 plus years.
4 years. Yeah.
Yeah, a pastor maybe. And Mark Few, of course, has been at Gonzaga forever. And Tommy thought maybe he was going to be it himself, be at Gonzaga forever. This opportunity came along. He's not the job hopper type of guy. He wanted to be here. I love that you got Mark Few to say one of my favorite quotes that I've heard from coaches is "Don't mess with happy."
Yeah,
Right. I love that line. I think that I sometimes wish that a lot of more players would kind of think along those terms rather than just like going into the transfer portal every year and looking for the next big paycheck. But Tommy is where he wanted to be, and he's talked a lot about like the community, having that connection with Tucson. I think his personality is just perfect for this market. And whether it was a distraction toward the end, a little, maybe a little bit, it's hard to quantify that. It could have been. But as I said, I don't know if I wrote that in the column. I wrote it in 5 takeaways after the Michigan game that it's better, at least if it was a distraction, at least your coach stayed. Whereas when Jay Johnson left the baseball program in 2021, it was a distraction and he left.
Yeah.
So that's like the double whammy. So
yeah,
they didn't have that.
I think it was a little bit, I mean, Tommy said he was locked in, and I'm sure he was, but still, it's just another thing. Even if you feel that way, it's still hovering around you. People are talking about it, and players are being asked about it in the locker room. And that's, for example, they had 2 days. I mean, here's a program where they pretty much keep everyone away from us. They have like thing to bring a guy out or two. This in the Final Four, you have all day Thursday. I think it's 30 minutes. The locker room's open on Friday, 40 minutes. So they're sitting there even if the coaches are locked in, there's no every media. I mean, it's very easy. Media people say, well, they might ask a player, well, what about Tommy Lloyd? Do you guys feel he's going to stay or whatever? I don't know if people are asking what they're asking, but that gets in the player's mind. They can't really escape it. So there's that. But also, Tommy Lloyd had been kind of, I think, been frustrated about the situation for a couple of months. And then he ran into a situation where North Carolina came up and he made the Final Four. All of a sudden, he's got this huge leverage. It's like, you got to use it. And if the timing is bad, the timing's bad. But you're right. To your point, it's a long-term thing that maybe can help Arizona basketball, be on a stable, competitive playing field for, at least 3 or 4 years here. And then, we'll see what happens after that. Everything changes so fast. But yeah, it's, they kind of had to do what they had to do. But you're right. He is happy here. He's moved multiple generations of his family here. He lives in the foothills with a pickleball court. He relates to people in this town. He loves going down to the South Side and just meeting random fans all over. I've seen the way he interacts with people, and there is some truth to that. He just wanted to be on a competitive playing field.
Yeah, and you can say that Chapel Hill, North Carolina, or Lawrence, Kansas are similar college towns to Tucson, but I think there's a lot more of a spotlight, more pressure, more of a fishbowl effect, I think, at those jobs than there is out here on the West Coast. There's just a sort of a natural tendency for the more Eastern you are, like just the more coverage you're going to get. If you're at North Carolina, you've also got the Duke dynamic at play, and you don't really have anything like that out here. So there's a lot of factors that go into these types of decisions. Final question for you about this past season, and then we will move on to what's coming next. And that is, was it a successful season? I say yes. I cover a lot of college baseball, and if you make the College World Series, no matter what happens from that point forward, for most programs, that is a successful season. So when Arizona made it to Omaha in 2021, made it in 2025, that's a successful season. To me, if you make the Final Four, that is a successful season, even though it ended disappointingly.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any argument for that. I mean, I would have considered it a successful season if they got to the Sweet 16, just because they also won the Big 12 by 2 games and they won the Big 12 tournament, and they, basically blew everybody away. And I feel like, and we talked about this before, I feel like in the tournament, it's a 1-game situation. You get a bad matchup, whatever, it shouldn't, but it does, but it shouldn't probably have as much effect on a perception of a season. But unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever, that's the way it is, and people tend to view it. I mean, I thought them winning the Big 12 by 2 games was just that was something I would not expected, and very impressive. And then to make the Final Four on top of that, yes, of course. But just up and down. I mean, a terrific year except for that last game. And I think for them, it's got to be frustrating that they end the season on that flat of a note. You think they would have put up a better game considering the season they had. And I think that adds a little sting to it. But that's literally the only sting. I mean, their losses were 4 points at Kansas. That's not a shame by any means, Darren Peterson or no Darren Peterson. And then they lose to Texas Tech at home when JT Toppin's playing out of his mind in overtime. So, that's up there. It's one of the best seasons in their history, no question.
Yeah, indisputably the case. So the college basketball season itself ended Monday night, and then 90 minutes later or so, the transfer portal opened. I think they need to maybe revisit that a little bit, maybe create a good idea to move it till after the season, but maybe put a little bit more cushion between the final buzzer going off and the portal opening, to let's let it breathe a little bit here for Michigan or whoever wins the national title. But it's kind of off we go. ESPN's Jeff Borzello reported that his expectation is that more than 3,000 players are going to be entering the portal. We might be approaching that number already. Here we are recording this on Wednesday, the second day of the portal. Whatever steps have been taken to slow this down or create more stability, they just haven't worked. It's as wide open and as insane as it has ever been. As of this recording, and we're recording midday Wednesday, no one from Arizona has entered the portal as of yet, and no one's really made any announcements about anything. So let's just kind of go through the roster here, Bruce, to the best of our ability and best of our knowledge as of today, and see where things stand. Now, assuming that they don't change the eligibility rules, which they could, there's been discussions about this. Ross Dellinger reported it. They're talking about going to a 5-year structure instead of 4. Assuming they don't do that in a timely enough manner, they're going to lose Jaden Bradley, Toby Awaka, and Anthony Delorso, who are 4-year seniors who are out of eligibility. Correct?
Yeah. As of today, as of this minute, in an hour, the rules could change, and maybe they come back. Who knows?
So it's so hard to plan these days. But those guys, they all transferred once. They all played 4 years of college basketball. No medical red shirts, no appeals for extra eligibility, any of that business. So we're going to assume that those 3 guys are out. Second assumption that we're going to make is that Braden Burries and Koa Pete will be declaring for and entering the NBA draft and not coming back. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Burries has risen up. I mean, it's hard to believe he would come back. He looks like a lottery pick right now. Koa Pete, apparently, if you look on the boards, he's slipping a little bit. He was a lottery. Now he's maybe mid to late first. If that's true, it's interesting to see. Maybe he just goes through and tests it, because I think nowadays anybody who's not a lottery pick might want to consider coming back, because the money's better. Back to college. Those late first round picks get maybe, I don't know, it depends on the slot, but I think $1.5 to $3 million or something, and you can do as well in college. So it wouldn't. I do think Pete will be gone. I just think he's wired that way. He has been kind of focused on that, so I'm not even sure it would matter. But it wouldn't shock me if if he decides to come back and they throw a really good NIL package at him, and he likes being there. He certainly seems like he's been happy this year. So, maybe if he felt like there's a little more development he could do, but it's just. But I think it's a safe assumption that both of those guys, would go. And Burries is also, he's going to be 21 in the fall. It's not like he's a freshman. He probably. He's actually at risk although granted the draft probably might be weaker next year than it is this year, but he's kind of at risk at his age. If he comes back and doesn't markedly improve, then his stock could slip. So I think he'll be gone.
Yeah, I think you make a great point about the current state of economics in college basketball, that it isn't a slam dunk, if you'll excuse the pun, that guys will declare for the NBA anymore because they can make a lot of money in college. And if you're not in the top half of the draft, it might make more sense for you to come back and try to improve yourself. So, Koa-Pete, very talented, great competitor, great feel for the game. He's far from a finished product. I mean, he could develop his outside shot more, his handles, his overall offensive game. He could probably get a little bit even quicker on defense. There's a lot of stuff for him to work on. His game doesn't fit a standard mold, I think, of what NBA teams look for these days. They're always looking for guys who can stretch the floor. I think defensively, he does have that switchability aspect to his profile. But it's interesting. I don't think it's like a guarantee, but I'm sure that both of them are minimally going to test the waters. Now, I would put two other players in that same category of they probably will test the NBA waters, and you have the ability to do that and come back. And those two players would be Mo Krivas and Ivan Karchenkov. I think from everything that we've been hearing, Mo might be leaning toward coming back, which would be amazing for Arizona to have a player of that caliber return for another year. And Ivan, I think, is still pretty raw. Very effective player, great energy, great defense. Needs a lot more polish on the offensive end. And if he comes back, he should be in a position where he's more featured on offense and will have a chance to develop his game and average a lot more points and so forth. What do you think about those two guys?
Yeah, that's true. I think you saw a little bit of that when those guys were out in late February. Karchenkov kind of became a little more featured by need, and he did play a little better offensively in that case. You're right. He could come. I think the X factor is a lot of guys nowadays declare for the draft and put their name in the portal at the same time, keep all their options open. So, and I think both of those guys are happy here, especially Krivas. He really seems to enjoy it. And he's been here 3 years now. And I think a lot of those international kids aren't as programmed to keep switching like American kids are. They don't grow up switching clubs every summer or whatever. So it wouldn't surprise me if he comes back. And then Karchenkov, boy, I don't know. He's a pro. I mean, he had a pro contract for 3 years in Germany. They bought out. They came here. Who's to say he doesn't look to sign another contract somewhere else? I don't know. But he seems pretty happy. I think he really enjoyed it. And we all saw he really, liked the spirit of it. He, basically he was one with the Zona Zoo. And I think that was kind of a revelation to him that college basketball could actually be so much fun, as opposed to playing in Germany where it's maybe some arenas are full and all, but it's a different vibe or whatever. It's more serious or whatever. I don't know. And so I think, those things bode well. But at the end of the day, if somebody's offering you, we saw those with Vasar last year, if somebody's offering you, 700,000 more than you might make in Arizona, well, maybe you look around. I don't know. So, but I would think, all things equal, those two guys are guys that are clearly on the bubble and could go either way. But, if they could go either way or go somewhere else. But, I think that they, if they had a competitive deal here, then we could see them come back.
Yeah. Who's to say that they're not pros here? I mean, it is, if you're being paid to play, you are essentially a professional athlete, right?
Yeah, no, I just meant that he's got that mindset because he's been years already. And so so in other words, you get to the end of the year, it's not like I'm going to think about, do I want to go to class and be a student? No, you're thinking the best deal, the best development. This is my life. I'm a pro. That's what I mean, kind of. But yeah, they all are. Yep. They all are, and it's whether or not they want to classify them as student athletes or employees or whatever, they're pros. There's no question about it.
The only caveat I would throw in regarding Krivas is he did have an injury during his career here. And sometimes when guys have had injuries, they're maybe a little bit reluctant to wait any longer to get that NBA contract. But most of the projections that we've seen have him going like at maybe the end of the first round in a really loaded draft. So maybe, by coming back another year, he could improve his stock, maybe take and hit more 3-pointers, which is sort of I don't know, it's just kind of a requirement these days for anybody, no matter how tall you are. And certainly, man, for rim protection, can't do much better than he's done this year. But hey, maybe he can block even more shots than he did this past season when, I don't know, he was certainly a strong candidate for Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. All right, the next category I've got is out ? And that is Dwayne Aristode. Definitely some rumblings that he might be the one guy who would consider going into the portal, that maybe there's some redundancy with Ivan Karchenkov, the two of them kind of being about the same size, playing the same position. If Ivan came back, then, what is Dwayne going to do? You talk to him and others as much as you could in the locker room. What do you think Dwayne's future looks like?
Yeah, I would think that he's at least going to look around. I mean, I don't know whether he'll formally enter the portal. I mean, that's the thing nowadays. You don't even really have to enter the portal as much as, for some guys, but a high level guy like him, excuse me, you can, your agent can kind of look around and say, okay, well, what if we came here, or what would he get, or what would be the situation, or whatever. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's that kind of stuff going on. And you're right, duplication could be an issue. If Karchenkov leaves for some reason, that could be more likely that Aristode stays. And when I've asked him about it, he's been, and they're all kind of non-committal because they have to be, but I definitely got a vibe that, I didn't get a vibe from him that, I love it here and I definitely want to stay. That was not the case. He spoke highly of, the team and Tommy Lloyd and this and that, but he's definitely struck me just talking to him. I got the vibe that, he's a guy who might be looking around.
Well, he didn't play very much toward the end of the season. Like,
right.
As much as we talk about like money and how big of a factor that is, like, to me, it's almost always comes back to playing time, right? Like, guys want to play, and that has to be a huge consideration for him. And there have been some other really good players under Tommy Lloyd who have left and gone on to play at other schools and have had bigger roles. And have done well, right? So Dwayne might fall into that category.
Yeah, I saw KJ Lewis. He was their leading scorer at Georgetown, and he's back in the portal again.
Yes, of course.
That may be a money thing. I don't know, but these guys want playing time, and most importantly, they want to be developed and exposed to maximize their chance in an NBA career. That's what it's all about for them. So, I'm thinking if you're Aristode, you're thinking, okay, you were pretty big time coming to high school. He got hurt here, that really set him back. And then I think he had bigger expectations for this year. And then, I don't know if he thought he was a one and done or maybe a two and out, but I'm sure he wants to make sure his sophomore year is going to be big, whether it's here or somewhere else, and it's going to be a platform for him. So that's really key. And, and the other side of it is too, is especially if they do keep Karchenkov, then if you're Tommy Lloyd and the staff, you have to think, okay, where would he fit considering what he wants? And maybe you have a little bit of a, okay, if you go, that's okay kind of deal. As a lot of these guys who've transferred out the last few years, I think it's been, not with the blessing of the staff, but I think it's kind of been almost mutual in some cases. Like, okay, for example, if Vasar doesn't go to North Carolina, they might not get Krivas to come back, or they, or if Carter Bryant didn't go pro, they wouldn't got Karchenkov. There's these things that kind of a domino effect there, and to what we were talking about earlier, that comes back to roster building and all these dominoes and all the strategy. It's quite I think it's really fascinating actually how you build a roster in this day and age.
Tommy talked about like sort of one player at a time in a way. I'm sure they have like an overall plan of what they want it to look like, but the pieces have to fall into place. All right, there's 3 more guys on the roster that I put into the developmental player bucket. CD Gay is one of them. He did play a decent amount this past season. Appeared in a handful of games, got some minutes. Mabil Mawut is another like stringy 6'11" ish, big player who needs a lot of time in the weight room to get up to the size and strength that's needed to play at this level. And then of course Bryce James, who's another one who redshirted this past year, as did Mabil. And Tommy made a reference to, hey, I want, I think Bryce can play at this level and I want to be part of that story. So, it seems like that relationship is going to continue. But I guess my question is, do you expect all 3 of those guys to be back, or is that too strong of a way to phrase it? No idea.
I mean, Emmanuel Stephan was sort of, CD Gay reminds me of Emmanuel Stephan, not the same player, but similar deal where they were super raw, but super upside. You bring him in and there's a thought that, this guy could really be something by the time he's a junior, maybe. And then he leaves UNLV. So who knows, CD Gay, and some of these guys gotta get paid, and so I have no idea about that, but I do think they would probably like him to come back. I mean, it seems like he has a lot of upside and he's a a really energetic, fun person to be around. I got to think that's good for the chemistry we're talking about. And then as far as the other 2, we haven't seen him enough or talked to him. I have no idea what's going on. I think you were there. I asked Tommy the other day about how are they doing, and he just kind of gave some general response. And yeah, he said he thinks Bryce James can develop into an Arizona level player. He didn't say that about Mabil. I don't know, what's going on there. I know Mabil's, a really interesting personality and a good guy. We just haven't really been able to talk to him, so I don't know what he's thinking or whatever, but it's possible, because they did redshirt, it's possible both those guys could give it another year and see how it plays out, with them not being in redshirt year. But, I don't know. I think Bryce James is just obviously really interesting because of who he is. And if he plays next year, there's going to be a lot of spotlight on him. And if he doesn't play, there's going to be a lot of spotlight on why he's not playing. I mean, there were coming into this year, there were some people that thought he was literally Arizona's best player. I mean, it's just, and that's just unbelievable kind of pressure that you're facing. And Tommy Lloyd says he wants him to be a normal kid. He wants to be a normal kid. I don't know that he can be. On the other factor with Bryce too is he came in with Koa and Burries. They're all friends. They all have the same agent, which is LeBron's group, the Clutch group, or whatever. And if Pete and Burries leave, maybe there's maybe he wants to shop around and find maybe a mid-major where he really could be more featured. That can happen too. But from all accounts, he does seem pretty happy here. So I just don't know. We haven't been allowed to talk to him, so I don't know.
They have 2 players who are committed to come here next season, current high school seniors. One of them is Caleb Holt, who's from the Southeast. He's been at a handful of different schools, like rated as high as number 4 overall in the class of 2026. The other player is Cameron Holmes, who's from the Phoenix area. He is also like a top 30 type of player. They are both wings. So you would think that point guard and probably power forward are the positions of greatest need as portal season gets underway. There has been already a report of a visit that is going to happen, right? With a player that Arizona fans are probably pretty familiar with. Yeah. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Jackson Selstad, the point guard at Oregon, he played really well against Arizona twice. So the first game wasn't as impactful, but he played really well in the Pac-12 tournament in 24. And then last year in that game in Seattle, in fact, I think he had like 25 points or something. And then, when it got down to the wire, he intentionally missed a free throw. And then Arizona got it back. I think Delorso picked up a foul and then he shot. So anyway, but huge factor in him, quick, kind of getting to be a veteran point guard now. and that could be a big answer. I think the big red flag is he's going to Louisville this weekend, and you all know that Louisville is up there budget wise, so to speak, with anybody. So who knows what he's looking for or whatever, if he's looking for a situation, or could a few $100,000 make a difference? Who knows? But the fact that they're scheduled to get him on campus, I think next Tuesday, that bodes pretty well. And that is kind of, you're right, that is kind of the one position where, even though all these things we're talking about are kind of unsimilar, they probably need a point guard. So if they can go get this guy, that might be a good fit right away, and see how it goes. But and it's possible. I know maybe he's an Oregon kid. Maybe staying out sort of west helps. I got to think that his interest, the fact that he's taking a visit here, must mean he's interested in the playing style. Having played against Arizona, he knows what it's about. So all those things bode pretty well, and so it wouldn't surprise me to see a really good chance at him.
So I'm gonna hit you with a question here that you might not have the exact answer to, but has Tommy ever taken a player who's been at multiple schools before? I feel like most of the transfers who come in have been at one school previously, which certainly that's the case with Jackson Shellstead, right? Like he's been at Oregon his whole career.
Yeah, you're talking about colleges, not high schools.
Colleges, yes.
Okay, because some of the high schools,
I understand,
or high schools or whatever. Gosh, yeah, top of my head, you're right. Most of them do seem like they've been one school. Pal Larson, Utah; Ballo, Gonzaga; Caleb Love, North Carolina. Yeah, I don't think so. Awaka, Tennessee; Townsend, Oakland; Bradley, Alabama; Vasar was here. Yeah, you're right. And Delorso Campbell, that was it for him.
I mean, there could be some exceptions to this, but I don't know. I feel like that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
As people are just sort of speculating about who they might go after, or who might fit, or whatever. Well, it doesn't seem like he wants guys who are just like, like I use the term job hopper.
Yeah, I mean,
right. So that to me, like, what are you prioritizing?
That's a really, really interesting point, Michael. I think that it's that could be. You wonder, is that a red flag where they're just like, oh, we're not going to take this guy, or is it just sort of the way it's worked out? Because if players do transfer 2 or 3 schools, usually that they've got something going on where they've got an agenda, they got an agent, where they're constantly trying to get more money every year, and that personality and backup is not the kind of thing he usually wants to deal with anyway. So. But yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think you're right. That those guys that travel around and job hopping are not popping up on this roster, and that may be, just again their personality types aren't maybe gonna fit, because if they're coming in every year, they're probably looking for a certain amount of shots or a certain amount of time and a certain amount of money, and all those things are not going to be necessarily promised to everybody they recruit here.
Mm-hmm. And then the one other thing that I think is worth mentioning is that there's always these international men of mystery. There's always some sort of European or African player that Tommy Lloyd finds, and he just emerges sometime in spring, and then all of a sudden there he is. He's here in summer, and he's a prominent part of the team, and those guys are usually pretty good. Tommy has a ton of connections overseas, and also has a very good eye for identifying talent. So that's kind of the wild card in this, is that there's kind of inevitably going to be an international player or players who join the mix, and we have no idea who those guys are. And
and that's because it's a different deal. Like they have to kind of keep it under wraps, because a lot of these kids are they already have signed pro contracts, or they're under control by a club, and they're not sure if they're going to go to the U.S. Tommy Lloyd said that. He said about Karchenkov, he said, we've known about him for years and we loved him, but we weren't sure we were ever going to get him because we thought he would stay. And again, he signed a 3-year contract to stay in Munich. It's not like, but things have changed, as we know. Things are now a lot more top international players are saying, hey, I can go to the U.S. and make a lot of money and get an education and play on this different level of different type of basketball that might prepare me for the NBA better. So there are more and more coming, and Lloyd's kind of taking advantage of that. I mean, but they do, it is weird. Yeah. So they keep it under wraps. Sometimes it gets out through agents, but sometimes it doesn't. I think there's a Lithuanian shooting guard that Arizona is looking at, according to 24/7. I don't know, whether that guy is gonna, what his deal is or whatever. It's hard to say, but you're right. I think it's almost like you can figure that they've always got like a handful of guys that they really are in on, and if it looks like those guys are going to fill a need, they'll take them. And if you recall, I mean, they were in on Karchenkov, and then when it looked like they could get him to buy out of that contract or whatever, it still went down to the end of May or something, and that's mostly because they were still playing. But I also think that Karchenkov wasn't going to come until he knew that Carter Bryant was going, and that didn't happen until like whatever mid-April.
Yeah. So the season is over. We are now into the portal season, the roster building season. As you mentioned, it is an interesting thing to cover. It is a different type of coverage for you, Bruce. I hope you'll be able to at least get some normal rest. You won't have as many late nights. There's no late games to cover, but there will be this torrent of news, like whether it's guys departing, guys coming back, visits, commitments. Like there's going to be a lot of stuff, which is, hey, that's great. It feeds the content machine.
Right? Yeah, I think last year I had a story literally 7 days a week until like April 30th or something last year. There's always something to write about. Yeah, that's the way it is. I mean, it just changes. You don't let up. The only difference is in April, you're not traveling. So there's that, but there's just as much news, and it's trickier because it pops up all the time. You don't really know. And then these international kids, sometimes they'll commit and it's 5 a.m. our time. So, I'll wake up at 7 or whatever. I'm like, oh geez, I got to go get on this, that kind of thing can happen. It's a crazy time.
It is. I call it the sort of like the transaction economy. Like the biggest beneficiaries in our business of the portal are like these reporters at 24/7 and ESPN and On3, and it's like they just have so much news to cover, and people are into it. Whether like it's going to have some negative long-term effects on college sports, the roster turnover being what it is, that kind of remains to be seen. But man, like when someone commits to your school and they've got some sort of a previous resume, or maybe someone you've heard of, it's exciting, right? Like it's always exciting for the fans when that happens, and those stories get a lot of page views. So I don't know, there's a certain value to it, even though, as you mentioned, it can be difficult to keep track of all that because you never know when it's going to happen. You sort of have to constantly be checking social media, checking in with your sources, etc. Yeah.
No, there's no question like that. It's a different deal. I mean, used to be guys would stay 3 or 4 years and you'd just be wondering about a couple of NBA decisions and maybe a transfer every now and then. But this year it's, literally everybody can leave every year. And I think Arizona actually probably looks a little more stable than most, but you never know. Here we are.
But we'll see. Let me see what this drum roll sound effect sounds like here. Yeah, that's what everyone's waiting to see what happens right next. They've got kind of that perpetual little drum roll going on in everybody's heads. All right, so that wraps up this particular episode of the Wildcast. This episode was brought to you by Pima Federal. Whether you're saving for your first car, buying a home, or growing your business, Pima Federal puts your goals first. They offer personalized solutions, competitive rates, and expert guidance every step of the way. Because at Pima Federal, banking isn't just about money, it's about you. Learn more at pimafederal.org. Thank you to Pima Federal for sponsoring the Wildcast. Thank you to Bruce Pascoe for joining us for this week's episode. Bruce, I hope you are able to get at least a little bit of rest and recuperate and get healthy. Like, we need you on that wall covering all of this business.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah. Basketball team. Gotta keep the phone handy. But yeah, no, it's all good.
That's right. All right. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you to everybody for listening. You can catch us on Apple, on Spotify. Please drop us a review if you so desire. You can also watch the video version of this on Tucson.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.